Spunky by Dori Brink. This is our last time to read Spunky. We're going to finish it today. So we're in the middle of chapter 18. We'll read the rest of 18 and 19. Last time we found out that Daphne took a plane somewhere east, and Peter is in a big truck in a moving van with Spunky and Happy. Here we go. The next morning, we were at a gasoline station on the highway. Cars were coming and going in every direction. A man in overalls had pumped gas into the truck, and now Peter was checking the tires. Happy and I watched all the activity on the highway from the side window. A small boy was leaning against one of the gas pumps, staring at us. My ears pricked up when I saw him, and I cocked my head to one side. He smiled, and I could tell he wanted to pet me. Sure enough, he came over to the truck and tried to reach me. He gripped the door handle to pull himself up. With a click, the door fell open and Happy darted out. The next minute, there was a piercing screech of car brakes and a horrible yelp that blotted out all the other sounds. Then everyone was running. I jumped out of the truck as Peter ran past me. I followed close on his heels. We reached a crowd of people standing around a car that was half on and half off the highway. Peter elbowed his way through the circle of people, but their feet quickly moved together, locking me out. I could only catch glimpses of what was going on. "That your dog, mister?" "Yes, it is." Peter's voice was strange in his throat. The man was wiping his face with a lard handkerchief. "Sure, I'm sorry," he said. "Just didn't see him." The feet in front of me were shifting, and I quickly squeezed in between them. Peter was kneeling down and touching a dark form on the ground. It was Happy. He didn't move. I started to whimper, and Peter scooped me off the ground and carried me through the crowd. He put me inside the truck and closed the door. I pressed my nose against the window, trying to see what I could. A car with blinding lights circling around its top pulled up, and men with caps on their heads got out. I saw Peter walk toward them. He was carrying Happy in his hands. He spoke with them for a few moments, then got into their car, still holding Happy. They drove off, and the crowd of people melted away. I waited. A dull, throbbing ache welled up inside my chest, making my ears pound. After a long time, Peter came back and got in the truck beside me. He put the key in the slot and started the motor. Then he reached out and touched my head. "No more Happy," he said. No more Happy? Would I never have Happy again? Or was it only for a little while? I swallowed back the thumping inside me and tried hard to understand. I moved closer to Peter, pressing up against his side. His nearness gave me comfort. Chapter 19. We kept on, driving, eating, sleeping. It rained more often now. My paws were covered with dried mud, and my shaggy hair was matted with knots. Daphne had not brushed me in a long time. Daphne? Sometimes the sweet smell of fresh-cut grass or sights of animals dotting the curve of sloping hills stirred my interest as we drove along. Once, I saw two dogs running along the edge of the road, heading towards us. One was big, the other small. I scrambled to the side window and leaned out as far as I could. "Dodger? Happy?" The truck swept past them, and I saw that they were just a couple of strange dogs. Still, I watched them disappear down the road until I could no longer see their tails swaying behind them. I settled back in my seat and stared straight ahead. The thumping ache inside me had become a familiar part of me now. The scenery was changing. More houses appeared along the road, some of them stretching high up into the sky. More cars followed or passed us. "We're almost there," Peter said. For the first time since we lost Happy, he turned and smiled at me. We left the highway and drove along quiet streets lined with thick, tall trees. At one street, we slowed down, and Peter searched the houses one by one. He stopped in front of a house surrounded by neatly cut grass and big, sprawling trees. "This is it," Peter said. "Come on, Spunk." We got out, and I rolled on the sweet-smelling grass while Peter pushed the doorbell. A woman opened the door and threw her arms around him. It was not Daphne. I slipped through the open door into the house. A little girl jumped back when she saw me. "Oh, Mommy," she cried, "this dog is dirty." The woman called Mommy did not look at me. She was quickly absorbed in Peter. "Oh, Peter," she was saying, "Daphne's in the hospital." Her hand was clasped on his arm. "What's wrong?" Peter's voice was shaky. "She's been there since yesterday. It seems the baby is arriving much sooner than we thought." "I'll go to her right away." "I'll take you there, Peter. It's not very far." They walked to the door, and I pressed myself against it, ready to go with them. Peter looked down at me. "You stay." Then, to the little girl, he said, "Take good care of Spunky, will you?" The woman opened the door and took Peter's arm. "Don't worry," she said cheerfully. "The dog will be all right. It's a very quiet neighborhood. We have a cat, you know, Princess. She's very shy, the little dear. Hides when strangers are in the house. Spunk will behave herself. I'm sure there'll be no trouble." The door closed, and Peter was gone. I was alone with the little girl. I gently wagged my tail at her. Her stiffly pleated skirt swayed as she backed away from me. "You sure are dirty," she said. The little girl walked to the back door and opened it. I went outside. For a moment, I didn't know where to go. Where was Peter? Where was everything I used to know so well? The sun was bright, and the bushes and the grass had strange new smells. There were trees and flowers behind the house. I was soon absorbed in sniffing each one of them to learn all I could about my new surroundings. There was a rustling in the tree above me, and I looked up. A cat was sitting on one of the branches, staring down at me. My heart leaped, but I did not move or bark. Our eyes locked. "No more cats for me," I remembered painfully. I lowered my gaze and walked away. I paused in front of a nearby bush and sniffed intently. The cat backed down the tree, then sharpened its claws on the bark. The sound made me wince, but I pretended not to hear. I continued sniffing. She sat at the foot of the tree waiting. I had to prove she did not scare me. I moved about slowly, pausing to examine everything in my path. Time passed, and my courage grew. I geared myself for the next step I was going to take. Without moving my head or eyes, I strolled past the cat as if she wasn't there. Her body stiffened tightly as I went by, but she didn't lunge. "Princess! Here, Princess!" It was the little girl at the back door, holding it open. The cat darted into the doorway and vanished inside the house. The little girl closed the door quickly. I was shocked. The cat, called Princess, lived in this house. It was hers, not mine. I shook myself vigorously to rid myself of the prickly feeling down my spine. For some time, I searched the neighborhood for scraps of food, but except for one broken bit of stale bread near the garbage can, could find nothing. The sun was going down, and hunger gripped my stomach. "Spunky! Spunky!" My ears pricked up. It was the little girl. Her voice sounded far away, but I knew where to go. In a few minutes, I was back at the house. She was waiting in front of it and clapped her hands when she saw me. "Time for dinner! Come on!" Dinner! They were going to feed me! She held the door open, and I ran into the kitchen, but stopped short at the sight. There was Princess, hunched over a bowl of food. She hesitated for a moment, then darted out of the room. "Ha! I like that!" Within a few seconds, I ate all the tiny nuggets in her bowl. "That's not your dinner," the little girl scolded. She spooned hunks of meat out of the can and put it down for me. Delicious. While I ate, she poured more nuggets into the cat's bowl and placed it on the floor near me. Where was the cat? Somehow I could feel her presence again in the room. I looked around carefully. There she was, crouched on top of the sink, watching me eat. I could not let her know how uncomfortable she made me feel. I continued to eat as slowly as possible. When I finished, I walked away a few paces and sprawled down on the floor. I rested my chin on my paw and waited. The cat jumped down and slunk over to her bowl. She did not eat, but darted her eyes at me. I turned my head away and pretended to sleep. She took a small bite of her food. I yawned and stretched out. The movement made her scamper out of the room. Ha! I could frighten her easily. I rolled on my back and pawed the air, tingling with pleasure. Then I got up and cleaned out her bowl again. She would have to learn that any leftovers were mine, even though this was her house. Later that evening, Peter returned with the woman. I jumped up and ran to greet him, wagging my tail, but he only touched my head with his hand. I followed Peter and the woman into the kitchen. He slumped into a chair and rubbed his eyes while the woman fussed with pots and pans. "Daphne seems so weak," he said. "I never thought she would give birth so soon." "Please don't worry, Peter. My sister's a strong girl, you know." There was a forced cheerfulness in her voice. "I hope the baby will be all right," Peter said, half to himself. There was that word baby again. "You'll have a fine baby, you'll see." They talked on and on. I sat down on the top of Peter's foot. He stroked my head without looking at me. At least I had him near me now. For several days it was the same. Peter returned to the house each evening and spoke to the woman about Daphne and the baby. I sat at his feet listening to the worried sound of his voice. During these days, I wandered about outside, sniffing and searching. Although I was well fed, there was a longing inside me that felt very much like hunger. The longing, strangely enough, was to be held tightly in someone's arms. Yes, Daphne's arms. I stayed close to the house most of the time, hoping Peter would suddenly return, but only Princess kept showing up. Each time I spotted her peeking out from under a bush and staring down at me from a tree, my spine twinged in alarm. She was watching me, but I kept pretending not to see her, reminding myself I could scare her easily if I wanted to. Early this morning, when I was led outside, I found Princess crouched low in the grass just a few feet in front of me. I sprawled down flat, facing her, leaving a safe distance between us, my chin between my paws. Our eyes locked. I kept perfectly still. So did she. The hair falling over my eyes shaded me somewhat from the brightness of her glare. Her spine hairs were standing straight up, but she did not blink. We stayed this way for a long time, testing each other's control. Now, I decided it was time to scare her. I sat up quickly and vigorously scratched my ear, anxious to see her dart away. No, she only sat up too. Her spine hairs were soft and smooth. She blinked her eyes contentedly and began to wash one of her paws. I got up and casually strolled away, trying to hide my disappointment. Princess was no longer afraid of me. A few streets away, I followed an inviting pathway leading to the top of a hill. Suddenly, a dog came bounding across the top and stood rigidly against the sky. The sunlight blinded me for an instant. The dog was powerful and slender, with long flowing ears like Dodger. Was it Dodger? I galloped up to it, my heart pounding with joy. But the moment I reached the dog, I realized it was not Dodger. The strange dog snarled down at me, baring its fangs. I turned away and slowly trotted down the hill. The dog leaped after me and sank his teeth into my back. I cried out in pain and twisted away, running down the hill as fast as I could. I ran all the way back to the house. The front and back doors were closed. I looked around for a place to hide. There was a car parked in front of the house, and I crawled underneath it. Pain flooded through me. I sank down on the cold, greasy pavement. Now, the pain of my wound seemed to mingle with all the aching sadness I had felt inside me for so many days. I whimpered and shuddered for a long time, until an odd tiredness came over me. I remained still, flattened against the pavement. I had no desire to move, to go anywhere. A shadow flickered across the pavement. Crouching underneath the curve of a tire was Princess. She was staring at me. I turned my head to avoid her glaring eyes. Was she going to lunge at me and pierce me with her sharp claws? If she did, I still wouldn't move or run away. There was a numbness to my pain now, and nothing more could add to it. I glanced at her again. She moved toward me, tail curling above her head, eyes flashing their light. She came closer and closer until she was standing hunched up over my head. I searched her eyes, wondering vaguely when she would strike. She crouched down in front of me, her whiskers just a breath away from my face. Her eyes blinked, and then she brushed her nose against mine and quickly darted away. It was a kiss. Princess had kissed me. The wonder of it startled me for a moment. Princess was my friend. But the wonder soon melted into the sadness and settled beside my pain. Nothing mattered anymore. Time passed. I did not stir even when I heard a car stop in front of the house. I heard Peter's voice and footsteps. He was with someone. They were going inside the house. I recognized the footsteps of the person with him. Was it? It's so good to be home, Peter. Daphne? I was afraid to be mistaken. I raised my head and listened carefully. They were at the door now, and other voices mixed with theirs. They were inside the house. Was it really Daphne? I crawled out from under the car and turned to the front door. I scratched it with my paw. Would they hear me? No one came to open it. I went around the back. Closed. There were some windows I could see through it. If I stood on my hind legs, There were some windows I could see through if I stood on my hind legs. I tried one window after another. I had a fleeting glimpse of the back of Peter's head, but no Daphne. I kept trying, balancing myself on my hind legs, stretching my neck backward and standing far enough away from the window to catch the right angle. Another window. Then I saw her. She had her head to one side and was looking down at a bundle she was cradling in her arms. There was a smile on her lips. I held my breath. She was moving toward me now and lowering the bundle into a small, high bed close to the window. Daphne raised her head, and I saw her face fully. Her eyes suddenly flew apart. "Spunky!" she cried. I wagged my tail slowly. In another moment, Daphne was standing at the back door, holding it wide open. I ran to her. She knelt down and pulled me into her arms, hugging me tightly. How good it was to feel her warmth, her love seeping through me, to breathe her scent again. Inside the hallway, she examined me more closely. "Oh, Spunky," she gasped when she saw my wound. "What happened to you?" She hurried to get some medicine and then spread it on my back. She was kneeling close beside me. Her hands were soothing. The medicine was cool. I no longer felt dazed. Daphne was home. "Come with me, Spunk," she commanded. I followed her into the bedroom. She walked to the high bed and gently lifted something out. It was covered with blankets. She settled herself into a chair that rocked back and forth. I sat down next to it and watched her intently. She leaned toward me, stopping the movement of the chair. With one hand, she parted the blankets. A small head appeared. It was yawning. "Say hello to the baby, Spunk," she said softly. So this was a baby. Daphne smoothed back the hairs falling over my eyes. I turned my head and kissed her hand. Then I reached up and kissed the baby's face. That was the first time I saw you. You are so small, and I know I will have to take care of you. The end.